The first bullet struck the wall where my heart had been half a second earlier. Concrete dust filled my mouth. The second tore through my coat. The third came from Elena's position, which meant the ambush was not a mistake, the exit was not compromised, and the woman I trusted had decided I was worth more dead. I dropped behind a steel support and counted the echoes. 6 shooters in the unfinished offices above. 2 at the eastern stairwell. 1 behind the elevator shaft. Elena remained somewhere beyond the glass partition to my left, close enough to see me, and far enough to deny me a clean line. The target lay on the conference room floor, with a neat hole behind his ear. The job itself had taken 9 seconds. The betrayal had been waiting before I arrived. "You are late," I called. Her answer came through the dust. "You always hated wasted motion. I thought you would appreciate the efficiency." A burst of gunfire chewed through the support. I watched the sparks, measured the angle, and moved before the shooter corrected. The building had been under renovation for 7 months. I had studied the plans, including the temporary braces and the unfinished cable trench below the western wall. Whoever planned the ambush had studied my methods. Elena had helped write most of them. I ran 3 steps, planted 1 foot on a stack of insulation boards, and kicked through the thin temporary wall. A man on the other side raised his rifle too slowly. I caught the barrel, drove it into his throat, and pushed him backward into the cable trench. His ankle folded beneath him. I broke his neck before he could scream. The rifle had 4 rounds left. I used 2. 1 shooter fell from the upper railing. Another spun into a plastic sheet and dragged it down with him. The room filled with white dust and moving shadows. I changed direction, climbed the outside of the stair rail, and reached the level above before the remaining men understood I had not gone for the exit. They expected me to flee. Elena knew better. I shot the man behind the elevator shaft through the shoulder, struck him with the rifle stock, and took his pistol. He wore no insignia. None of them did. Professionals with clean equipment, fixed positions, and no reason to speak. The eastern stairwell door opened. I fired through it twice. A body hit the floor, but the second guard stayed behind cover. His return shot clipped my side. Heat spread under my shirt. Not deep, painful enough to slow the left turn of my torso. I changed the plan. There was an exposed gas line along the ceiling, capped for future use. I shot the valve, fired once more into the sparking junction box, and threw myself behind a concrete divider. The explosion punched the air from my lungs. Glass crossed the room in a silver wave. Men shouted. 1 fell through the temporary railing and landed hard enough that I heard bone break over the fire alarm. I rose into the confusion. 3 more died before they found me. She wore the same black field suit she had worn on our last 11 missions. Her ash-blonde hair touched one side of her jaw and left the other exposed. No helmet. No blood. Her pistol remained steady despite the blast. I had seen that face asleep beside me, reflected in train windows, lit by hotel bathroom mirrors at 3 in the morning. I had trusted it because I had believed trust meant accepting one unguarded angle. She aimed at that angle now. Why? I asked. Not because I needed comfort. I needed the shape of the threat. The organization changed, she said. You did not. That is not an answer. You became inconvenient, too effective to control, too visible to keep, too dangerous to release. And you chose them. Her jaw tightened once. I chose the side that survives. I looked at her weapon. It was not one of ours. The frame was too smooth, the metal almost black, with a pale symbol etched near the chamber. 4 hooked lines around a narrow vertical eye. It caught the firelight without reflecting it. I had never seen the mark. That made it more important than the gun. Who gave you that? I asked. For the first time, Elena hesitated. Then the last surviving shooter rose behind me. I saw him in the glass, turned, and fired. My bullet took him through the mouth. Elena's shot entered below my ribs. The impact felt like a hammer wrapped in heat. I hit one knee. She came closer, careful even then. We had trained each other too well for sentiment. You could have told me, I said. You would have tried to stop me. Yes. Her eyes did not leave mine. That is why I did not. I reached for the pistol at my thigh. She shot me again. The unfinished tower tilted. Fire alarms became distant bells. My hand lost strength before it reached the grip. Elena stood over me, with the impossible symbol burning pale against the black weapon. I had killed for governments, syndicates, intelligence services, and men who believed money could purchase consequences for everyone except themselves. I had survived because I assumed every structure could fail. Every structure, except one. My final thought was not fear. It was a promise. I would find her again, and when I did, she would regret ever teaching me what trust cost. Death was quieter than I expected. No tunnel, no light, no remembered voices. Only a black surface beneath my boots, and a sky filled with violet stars that moved like living eyes. A woman stood ahead of me. She was tall, with skin the color of midnight and silver-white hair floating around her as if she were underwater. A crescent of dark light hung behind her head. The gown she wore held constellations that shifted whenever I tried to follow them. Her eyes were violet starbursts. "Kael Veyr," she said. I checked my body by habit. No wounds, no weapon, same height, same hands. The scar through my right eyebrow remained. "You know my name," I said. "I saw the anger that survived your death." "That is less useful." One corner of her mouth moved. "You ask better questions than most heroes." "I am not a hero." The black surface changed. Images rose around us. A city under white towers, a village burning beside a road, chained workers in a quarry, soldiers kneeling before a radiant altar, children coughing in a clinic while priests collected signatures from their parents. "My world is trapped beneath people who have made cruelty efficient," she said. "Nobles sell law. Priests sell cures for suffering they create. Kings command armies they do not understand. Heroes protect the visible order because they believe disorder is worse. And you want an assassin. I want someone who attacks the structure that makes the target possible." What do I receive? The images vanished. One life in Valedorn, basic language, a body capable of resonance, though no affinity chosen for you. Weapon? No. Class? No. Magic? Whatever you earn. Then you want me dead twice. I will allow you to choose 4 people. Millions of violet panes opened around us. Faces, names, fragments of ability, moments of danger. A child hiding beneath a market stall, a general washing blood from his hands, a woman breaking stones in a prison yard, a merchant calculating grain routes while a guard beat him for being slow. The information was incomplete. It showed pressure points, latent ability, and a few emotional facts, enough to identify potential, never enough to claim ownership. They obey me? I asked. No. They know I chose them? No. Can I replace them? No. Can I inspect everyone after I arrive? No. This is one choice. 4 lives, then the window closes. That made the decision real. I ignored strength first. Raw power was visible and therefore expensive. I searched for combinations. Medicine, information, supply. People whose talents had been suppressed by the systems around them. Lyra Vale appeared in chains beneath a military tribunal. A defensive force curved around 2 younger prisoners, even while she bled from the mouth. Seraphine stood in a temple laboratory with poison on one table and medicine on the other. Her profile did not separate them. Neither did she. Mira Ashvale crouched in a gutter, fingers vanishing into a shadow she did not understand. Hidden blood, unstable expression, exceptional adaptability. Bram Halden sat over 3 ledgers while men called him useless because he could not lift a sword. His probability sense turned roads, food, and human behavior into faint gold lines. I chose all 4. The violet panes collapsed. Mixara studied me. You did not choose the strongest. I chose the parts of an organization. They are not parts. I know. Her look suggested she did not believe me. "Where are they?" I asked. The stars dimmed, owned by the same man. A final image appeared, an iron-barred slave carriage moving along a forest road. Lyra sat upright despite bruises. Seraphine held a feverish captive against her shoulder. Mira watched the lock. Bram counted wheel rotations under his breath. "How long?" "Minutes." "Who is the man?" "That answer will matter after you survive the road." Violet light closed around my wrists. "One more question," I said. Nixara's expression became unreadable. The symbol on Elena's weapon. The world beneath me opened. "Survive," she said, "and you may learn why it exists in both worlds." Cold earth struck my knees. I was beside a forest road under a gray sky, wearing rough trousers, a linen shirt, and boots that had never been broken in. My body was mine in shape, but not in condition. Leaner than an untrained laborer, stronger than it looked, weaker than I remembered. My side held no bullet wounds, yet the muscles carried none of my old endurance. A dark violet pulse moved once beneath the skin of my left wrist. The chosen four were close. I stood, tested balance, breath, reach, and pain response. No hidden blade, no coin, no pack. A narrow creek ran downhill to my right. The road curved around a ridge before crossing an old timber bridge. Deep prints marked the mud near the water. Something large lived there. I heard wheels before I saw the convoy. One covered wagon, one barred carriage, 6 mounted guards, 2 men on the wagon bench, 1 crossbowman on the carriage roof. The road narrowed between the creek bank and a slope of loose stone. 30 paces beyond the bridge, the earth dropped into a ravine. The convoy was stronger than my new body, and careless enough to make that irrelevant. The animal tracks led from the creek into reeds thick with black mud. The prints were broad, 3-toed, and fresh. Bark on the nearest tree had been rubbed away at shoulder height. A territorial creature, heavy, likely poor eyesight if it lived in marsh water. The wind carried the convoy's scent toward the reeds. I needed more. A dead rabbit hung from a guard's saddle. Blood had soaked the lower half of its fur. I could not reach it yet, but the rear rider would pass within 6 paces of the slope. I pulled dry grass from beneath a fallen log, twisted it around a splintered branch, and used 2 stones to strike sparks into the bundle. Smoke first, fire later. Then I climbed the slope and loosened the largest stones, without letting them fall. The plan had 3 steps. Draw the beast onto the road, block the lead riders at the bridge, break the convoy into pieces before anyone understood there was a man inside the accident. The first horse rounded the bend. I waited until the rear rider was below me. Then I dropped. My boots hit his shoulders. His spine folded over the saddle horn. I caught the dead rabbit, cut its strap with the guard's own knife, and rolled down the far side as the horse screamed. "Ambush!" someone shouted. I threw the rabbit into the reeds. The mireback came out like a piece of the swamp deciding to kill something. It was wider than a horse, plated in dark green hide, with a blunt head and 2 hooked tusks around a mouth full of grinding teeth. Mud exploded beneath it. It hit the riderless horse, lifted it sideways, and drove both animal and saddle into the road. The rear formation stopped. I lit the grass bundle and threw it beneath the lead wagon. The horses shied from the smoke. The driver pulled left. The front wheels struck the stones I had loosened, and the wagon turned across the bridge. The convoy split, not cleanly. The crossbowman saw me. He fired from the carriage roof. I twisted. The bolt cut through my sleeve and opened the skin along my upper arm. I ran under his neck's line, rather than away from it, reached the rear wheel, and drove the stolen knife through the leather brake strap. A guard leaned down with a short spear. I caught the shaft against the wheel, let the carriage's movement wrench it from his hands, and rammed the butt into his mouth. Teeth broke. He fell beneath the wheel. The carriage lurched over his legs with a wet crack. Inside, chains rang against iron. The mireback smashed into the wagon again. 1 horse went down. A guard tried to turn his mount toward me and found the road blocked by a screaming animal and a wall of smoke. The crossbowman reloaded. The carriage began rolling backward. The ravine waited behind it. I jumped onto the rear step and reached for the roof. The unfamiliar body failed me by 3 inches. A hand came through the bars. Small, tawny skin, quick fingers. Mira caught my wrist and pulled just enough for me to reach the frame. "You are welcome," she said through clenched teeth. I climbed. The crossbowman swung the weapon sideways. I ducked the stock, drove my shoulder into his hips, and took us both over the edge. He landed on the road. I landed on him. His breath left in one hard sound. I took the crossbow and fired at the lead driver's thigh. He dropped the reins. The carriage gained speed toward the ravine. Inside, Lyra had wrapped both hands around the chain linking her wrists. Blue-silver light flickered around her arms. She pulled once. The iron did not break, but the chain tightened across the bars beside her. "When I say now," I shouted, "pull left." "Who are you?" "Busy." Seraphine had one hand pressed to the feverish captive's neck. Green-violet threads moved faintly between her fingers and a woman's skin. Bram had braced both feet against the floor and was staring at the wheel assembly. "Rear left pin," he called. "If it comes out, the axle will twist." I looked down. The retaining pin sat beside the wheel hub, half rusted and vibrating loose. A mounted guard reached me before I could touch it. His sword cut down. I caught his wrist with both hands and used the carriage's motion to drag him from the saddle. He struck the bars face first. Lyra seized his coat through the gap and held him there. "Now?" she demanded. "Not yet." I tore the sword from his grip, drove it into the road between 2 planks, and kicked the rear left pin free. The wheel shifted. "Now." Lyra pulled left. The blue-silver flare around her hands brightened. Every captive leaned with her. The carriage axle twisted, the damaged wheel bit into the road, and the entire vehicle swung sideways. It stopped with one corner hanging over the ravine. The guard Lyra held slipped beneath it and vanished without a scream. For 1 second, no one moved. Then the mireback roared behind us. 3 guards remained. One had lost his horse. One held a bow near the blocked bridge. The last drove his mount through the smoke toward the carriage, eyes fixed on the chained prisoners. He was not coming to save them. He drew a hooked blade and aimed through the bars at Seraphine's throat. Lyra could not reach him. I jumped from the roof. The horse struck my shoulder and spun me across the road. Pain burst through my chest. I rolled beneath the next hoof, came up inside the rider's reach, and cut the back of his knee with the stolen knife. He fell sideways. Seraphine reached through the bars and touched 2 fingers to his neck. Green-violet lines flashed under his skin. His limbs locked before he hit the ground. "That was not enough to kill him," she said. "It will be." Its tusk entered below the guard's ribs and lifted him into the smoke. The bowman loosed. A blue-silver plane appeared across the carriage bars. The arrow struck it, slowed, and dropped inside without reaching the feverish woman. Lyra stared at the light as if it had betrayed a secret. I did not give her time to think about it. I took the fallen sword and ran at the bowman while the unhorsed guard fled toward the bridge. The bowman fired too quickly. His arrow passed under my arm. I closed the distance, knocked his bow aside, and cut through the inside of his elbow. He dropped to his knees. I drove the pommel into his temple. The last guard reached the bridge. Bram shouted. The front wagon had shifted. Its burning cover collapsed, and the trapped horses dragged it sideways. The bridge railing cracked. The fleeing guard looked back once. That was enough. The wagon rolled into him and carried him through the railing into the creek below. Silence returned in pieces. Fire snapping, horses screaming, captives breathing, the mireback grinding bone near the reeds. I climbed onto the carriage step. The door had a heavy lock and a chain around the lower hinge. Mira held a sliver of metal between 2 fingers. I almost had it, she said. Finish it after we stop falling. I used the dead guard's key ring. The lock opened. The door swung outward. 20 people inside stared at me. Lyra stood first, despite the chain between her ankles. Seraphine moved the feverish woman behind her. Mira's hand disappeared somewhere near the fallen guard's knife. Bram adjusted his cracked spectacles and studied me with the expression of a man who had found a number that should not exist. I opened the first set of chains, then the second, then every lock in the carriage. No one thanked me. Their suspicion was reasonable. The captives spread across the road in a rough half-circle. Some carried broken boards. One had taken the bowman's knife. Lyra held the dead rider's sword in both hands, point low but ready. Her copper-red hair had come loose from its braided crown, and dried blood marked the narrow scar on her cheek. She looked like an officer who had survived the loss of her uniform, but not the habit of command. "Put the keys down," she said. I placed them in the mud between us. The weapons, too. I set down the sword, crossbow, and knife. Then I pushed the bag of convoy food toward them with my boot. A murmur moved through the group. "You knew which lock held the carriage," Lyra said. "You knew where to stand. You called to us as if you expected help." I did. Why? The true answer involved a goddess, a dying promise, and profiles I had viewed in a place outside the world. None of that would make me sound less dangerous. "I was looking for 4 people," I said. "You are one of them." Her grip tightened. Seraphine came forward. The white streak in her black curls made her pale green eyes seem brighter. She had found a strip of cloth for the feverish woman's forehead, and a needle-thin shard of metal for herself. "And the other 3?" she asked. I looked at Mira, Bram, and Seraphine in turn. You, him." Mira tilted her head. "That is either flattering or the beginning of a very specific kidnapping." I opened the locks. Some kidnappers begin with better marketing. Lyra did not smile. "Why us?" "Because you can do things the people who owned you did not understand." I pointed to the dropped arrow near Lyra's feet. "You stopped that." Her eyes sharpened. To Seraphine I said, "You locked a man's body with 2 fingers and kept a feverish woman breathing while the carriage fell apart." To Mira, "You were halfway through the lock before I arrived. The shadow beneath your hand moved against the light." Her humor vanished. Bram looked almost offended when I turned to him. "You counted the wheel rotations, identified the weak axle pin, and noticed the wagon before anyone else." He pushed his cracked spectacles higher. "That is not usually included in speeches about exceptional people. Wars are usually lost by people who dismiss supply and timing." The captives shifted. My arm bled. My shoulder had begun to stiffen. The mireback remained in the reeds, occupied but not permanently satisfied. "We have minutes," I said. "Take the food, water, horses that can still walk, and every weapon. There is a search party behind this convoy whether they know they need one yet or not." Lyra raised the sword. "And then you decide where you are going. You expect us to follow you? No. I expect you to survive long enough to make a decision." I looked around the half-circle. "I open the locks. That does not make you mine. Decide where you are going before I decide where I am." One older man lowered his board. A woman began collecting water skins. The others followed slowly. Mira walked to the food bag, took 2 silver coins from a guard's purse, selected the smallest knife, and backed toward the trees. Lyra watched me. "You will let her leave?" She heard the same offer you did. Mira paused at the edge of the road. "You are not going to follow me?" she asked. "No." "Secretly?" "No." "With magic?" "I don't have any." That answer seemed to interest her more than the others. She disappeared between the trees. Bram stared after her. "There is an 81% chance she circles back." "Based on what?" Seraphine asked. "She took only 2 coins. Perhaps she is modest." "She also took the knife with the worst balance. The better one is under the rear wheel." I looked at him. He swallowed. It was difficult not to notice. The feverish woman coughed. Seraphine went to her immediately. She cannot ride, Seraphine said. 3 others have injuries that will open if they are put on horses. The convoy road will be searched, I said. The fastest group can reach the southern trade route before dark. Lyra's answer came without hesitation. Then the fastest group goes without us. I am not leaving injured people beside a road where slavers will return. Staying together makes all of you slower. Yes. It increases the chance of recapture. Yes. The 4 of you are the ones they will search for most aggressively. Separating you from the others gives the civilians a better chance. Her steel blue eyes did not move. You mean it gives the 4 people you chose a better chance? She was right. My first plan had protected the 4 people I had selected and treated everyone else as a delay. That might have improved our odds, but Lyra would never accept it. And her refusal told me more about her than any profile had. Seraphine knelt beside the feverish captive. If you leave her, she dies before morning. Bram opened one of the convoy ledgers and ran a finger down a route column. There is a village northwest, Grayfen, 6 miles by the old charcoal track. The wagon was scheduled to collect grain there tomorrow. A village on a slaver's collection route is not safety, I said. No, Lyra said, but it may have roofs. A branch moved behind me. Mira stepped from the trees holding the better knife. The road behind us has riders, she said. 5, maybe 6. They found the guard who fell from the bridge. We have less than an hour. Bram exhaled. I expected you to return. Mira pointed the knife at him. Keep your expectations private. I crouched beside the tracks and studied the mud. Grayfen is northwest. Then we create 2 trails. 3 riders take the horses south and leave them near the trade road. Everyone else uses the creek for half a mile. Then the charcoal track. Lyra watched me. Everyone? Everyone. It was the first order she accepted. We moved. The creek water reached our knees and numbed our feet. 2 captives supported the feverish woman between them, while Seraphine walked backward, watching her breathing. Lyra kept the slowest people in the center. Bram carried a ledger under his shirt to keep it dry. I remained at the rear until the false riders split away. Mira appeared and disappeared among the trees without explaining where she went. The search party reached the destroyed convoy 20 minutes after we left. Their voices carried down the valley. Dogs began barking soon after. I cut a strip from my bloody sleeve and tied it to a branch leading south. Then I crushed mireback dung into the creek bank where the dogs would find it. The searchers might believe the beast had dragged wounded captives downstream, or the dogs might refuse the scent entirely. Both were useful. Grayfen appeared near dusk as a line of broken roofs beneath a stone ridge. It had once been larger. Foundations marked where homes had burned or collapsed. A damaged mill stood beside a narrow stream. The communal hall still had a roof, though half its windows were boarded. An old chapel leaned behind it, white stone stained gray. A woman in a mustard shawl waited in the road with a wood axe. 6 residents stood behind her, carrying farm tools. You are not bringing them here, she said. Bram glanced at the village. Tessamar? The woman looked at him. Who is asking? A man who read tomorrow's collection schedule. Her expression changed by a fraction. I stepped forward with empty hands visible. The collection will not arrive. That is worse. Probably. Tessa's dark eyes moved over the freed captives, the blood, the weapons, and the chains some still carried because removing ankle irons on the road had taken too long. You killed them? She asked. Yes. All of them? Enough. Lyra came beside me. People need water and one night under a roof. We will not take your homes. Tessa looked at the feverish woman. Her grip on the axe loosened. The well works, she said. The hall leaks. The storehouse is empty. Bram looked toward the footprints around the storehouse. It is not empty. Every resident behind Tessa stiffened. He raised both hands. I am not accusing you. The lock is used daily, and the ground near the rear wall has been swept. You have hidden grain. That is sensible. Tessa stared at him. and now 20 hungry strangers know. 21, Bram said, including the man who brought us. She turned to me. Is he always like this? I met him this afternoon. That was not an answer. I suspect it will be. Tessa lowered the axe. The first night was work. We hauled water, cleared rat nests, dragged rotten benches from the hall, and counted blankets. Bram recorded every loaf, sack, cup, and usable bedroll on a board where everyone could see it. Tessa kept the storehouse keys. Public numbers and local control mattered more than my weapons. Lyra placed 2 watchers on the ridge, 2 at the road, and 1 near the stream. She showed villagers how to hang stones inside metal cups so a pulled line would sound an alarm. Mira inspected every back wall and window, then declared the chapel easier to enter than a drunk man's promise. Seraphine cleaned wounds in the corner of the hall. The feverish woman stabilized after Seraphine boiled willow bark, crushed 2 bitter leaves from the roadside, and used faint green-violet threads to pull heat from the swelling around an infected cut. No one called it holy. They only watched. I repaired the well cover with a broken wagon plank. Tessa found me there after dark. Men like you do not fix covers, she said. Men like me prefer not to drink dead rats. Men like you win a fight, take what you need, and leave the rest of us waiting for the people you angered. That may still happen. She did not appreciate the honesty. Then why let us inside? I asked. Tessa looked toward the hall. Because the woman with the white streak asked for hot water before she asked for food. Because the red-haired one gave her blanket to a child. Because the small thief put my key back when she could have kept it. Mira's voice came from the roof. I wanted to know what had opened. Tessa looked up. Get down. The roof leaks less here. Get down anyway. Mira did. Near midnight, the Ridge Watch found hoofprints on the eastern path. 2 riders had approached close enough to see the hall lamps, then turned back. Retaliation was no longer a possibility. It was scheduled. We ate at 1 long table the next morning. Porridge, half a piece of hard cheese each, and water that tasted of old stone. Bram had calculated 9 days of food if no more residents returned, and 5 if the freed captives all stayed. They will not all stay, Tessa said. They should not, I replied. Anyone with a safe destination leaves before the roads close. Lyra set down her spoon. And the rest? We determine whether Grayfen can become safe enough to hold them. You keep saying we, Mira said. She sat backward on the bench, 1 boot hooked beneath it. I am curious when the invitation happened. Good. I dislike invitations. They are usually unpaid work, wearing clean clothes. Bram placed the convoy ledger on the table. The men who owned us worked for Oren Tall. He collects taxes and debt contracts for Lord Cassian Vane. Grayfen appears here 14 times. Tessa's face hardened. Tall comes every month, she said. The amount changes after he arrives. Changes how? I asked. The village owes grain. We give grain. He says the road toll increased, or the mill assessment changed, or someone missed a Labor Day. The debt grows anyway. Missing residents? She looked toward the boarded window. 7 in 2 years. 3 taken as debt servants. 4 accused of theft after arguing. None returned. The simple truth was already visible. Tall was not collecting debt. He was creating it. 3 days, I said. Lyra frowned. To prove what they are doing, and decide whether we can stop it without bringing soldiers onto Grayfen. During those 3 days, anyone may leave. After that, I act. Seraphine leaned back. You have not explained why you are helping people you chose before you met them. The table went still. Because someone arranged my death, using a symbol that should not exist in my world, I said. The same force may be active here. You 4 were the only advantage I was allowed to choose before I arrived. Mira's amber eyes narrowed. Allowed by whom? A woman named Nixara. She called herself a goddess. I have not decided whether that makes her trustworthy or merely powerful. Bram's spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. You were sent by a goddess, he said. You appeared at the exact hour of our transport, knew our hidden abilities, and destroyed 8 armed men without a weapon. There were 9. Bram's expression became reverent. That correction did not help, I said. Lyra ignored him. What happens when one of us stops being useful? Mira looked at her bowl. I answered the question, not the challenge beneath it. You leave, stay, argue, fail, or change roles. Usefulness is not ownership. Words, Lyra said. I pushed the recovered weapons toward her. Then take command of Grafen's defense. You may cancel any operation that knowingly abandons civilians. Her eyes met mine. Including yours? Including mine. Seraphine tapped one finger against the table. I control medicine and poison. No broad dosing of servants, prisoners, or coerced guards. No contagious agent. If you hide a biological risk from me, I leave. Agreed. Mira said, no cages, no restraints, no magic mark that tells you where I am. I cannot track you. You knew when I was near. I showed them the faint dark violet line beneath my wrist. It pulses when one of you is in mortal danger. That is all. Can you remove it? I do not know. Then if you learn how, you tell me before touching it. Agreed. Bram adjusted his spectacles. I require complete internal numbers. Food, money, debts, reserves, losses, expected losses, and any information that changes probability. You want audit authority. I want not to discover that people died because the real number was in your pocket. Agreed. Tessa folded her arms. And Grafen, you keep the store keys, I said. Residents receive warning before we use the village as part of any plan. You decide the civilian allocation with Bram. Not ownership? I own nothing here. Good, she said. There is nothing worth owning. That was not true. Grafen had water, roofs, people, and a position near a trade road. It had the beginning of permanence. The meeting ended with a 3-day agreement. No oath. No promise beyond the work in front of us. Seraphine caught me before I left the hall. Your shirt is stuck to your side, she said. It is a shallow cut. That is what men say when they fear the needle more than the wound. I do not fear needles. Then take off the shirt. She converted a chapel side room into a treatment space by clearing broken icons from a table and hanging a blanket across the doorway. Morning light touched the gold serpent cuff on her ear. I removed the torn shirt. Her gaze moved over the old scars across my chest and back. Not admiring, not clinical either. Your previous world was unkind, she said. I was often unkind first. She cleaned the cut on my side. The cloth burned. Her fingers were warm, precise, and close enough that I felt her breath when she leaned in. Green-violet threads appeared between her fingertips and the torn skin. Pain tightened sharply, then eased as the wound edges drew together. You trusted the person who killed you, she said. It was not a question. Yes. And now you inspect everyone for the knife before they enter the room. Her pale green eyes lifted to mine. I am going to close this wound. I am not promising not to hurt you. Those are different things. Clear distinction. Good. The thread of magic tightened. I held still. For the first time since waking in Valedorn, stillness required more control and violence. Over the next 2 days, Grafen became less temporary. Lyra drilled the watch until every resident knew where to stand when the alarm line rang. Seraphine turned one chapel room into a clean treatment space. Bram and Tessa counted food in public. Mira mapped every path into the village and found 3 that even Tessa had forgotten. Tessa also found a dark wool coat in an abandoned chest and cut it to fit me. Mira added concealed inner pockets and an asymmetrical collar that did not catch when I turned. By the 3rd morning, Grafen's problem had a name and a human shape. Orenthal arrived once a month with guards, revised the debt after inspecting what the village still possessed, and removed anyone who challenged the new total. Lord Cassian Vane signed every order. The vanished residents were not serving lawful contracts, they were being sold. We still needed proof strong enough to survive Vane's title. Bram found the first half in the convoy ledger. He spread it beside Grafen's village copy on the long table. The writing differed, but the dates and family marks matched. "This is what Grafen paid," he said, touching Tessa's record. 14 sacks of grain, 2 carts of timber, and 30 labor days. This is what Tal reported. His finger moved to the convoy ledger. 9 sacks, 1 cart, 12 days. The missing amount became unpaid debt. Tessa stared at the 2 columns. "We gave him more, and he wrote less." "Every month," Bram said, "the difference grows. When a family cannot pay the debt he invented, he can seize land or bodies. That was the crime. The rest was mechanism." "Will this convict Veyr?" Lyra asked. "It proves fraud," Bram said. "Not where the people went. Veyr will claim Tal acted alone." Mira sat on the window ledge, rolling a stolen key across her fingers. "Then we find the people." Vane's estate stood 4 miles east, past orchards and a low stone wall. Tal used the service wing for collections. A stable boy who had fled, to Grafen said. Wagons sometimes arrived at night and left lighter by morning. Mira and I watched the estate from the tree line until dusk. 2 guards at the front gate, 1 behind the stable. Dogs in the north yard, servants moving between the kitchen and west wing. The east cellar had no windows, but a narrow drainage opening ran beneath the wall. "Too small," I said. "For you," Mira replied. She lay flat beside the ditch and pressed her fingertips into the shadow beneath the stone lip. The violet-black edge around her hand thickened. Her fingers sank past the knuckles. Mira's breath caught. "Stop," I said. "I can feel the other side." Feeling the far side does not mean you can return from it. The shadow climbed her wrist like cold ink. Her face lost color. I caught her forearm and pulled. For an instant something resisted from inside the stone. Then her hand came free. Her fingertips were blue and numb. She flexed them without success. "I reached it," she whispered, "and nearly lost your hand." I noticed. I wrapped her hand inside my coat to warm it. She looked down at the dark fabric around her fingers, then up at me. "You did not know that would happen," she said. "No." "The goddess did not tell you?" "No." "Good. Why is that good?" "Because you look less like a man reading from instructions." A wagon entered the estate. Through a gap in the wall, we saw 2 shackled men lying beneath sacks. That gave us a living target, not yet evidence. Seraphine confirmed the connection after we returned. Mira had scraped a waxy residue from the drainage channel. Seraphine warmed it over a candle, smelled it once, and placed the dish down. "Sleepthorn and gray poppy," she said. "The same mixture they used in the carriage water. Too much for comfort. Enough to make prisoners quiet and confused." Bram tapped the duplicate totals. False debt, hidden prisoners, same sedative. "Enough to know the truth," I said. "Not enough to remove Veyr cleanly." Tessa took a folded letter from beneath her shawl. "Magistrate Valedorn asked for records 2 winters ago," she said. "We sent copies. Tal said the messenger never arrived." "Was he?" Lyra asked. "They found him in the stream." The letter carried a silver quill seal and a circuit schedule. Dorn would pass the old toll station the following morning. Bram and I met her there. Valedorn arrived with 6 official riders and no banners. She was tall, dressed in a charcoal coat, with steady brown eyes and a silver quill pin at her collar. She read the 2 ledgers without interrupting. Then she looked at me. "Who are you?" "A man who found your missing evidence." That answer is designed to prevent a second question. It failed. She turned to Bram. "Are these totals accurate?" "Yes, I can show the calculation in 1 page." "Begin with the crime." Bram adjusted his glasses. Tal took more than he reported, turned the missing payment into debt, and sold the debtors. She needed 3 things: Vane's private ledger, living prisoners who could testify, and a safe destination for them. Without those, his allies could call the arrest unlawful and send soldiers to restore him. "Bring me those 3 things," she said. "I will act. Bring me a burned estate and dead witnesses, and I will have a tragedy, not a case." "Where will you wait?" I asked. "On the eastern ridge until midnight. After that, I continue my circuit. Veyr transfers prisoners tonight. Then you have until midnight." Lyra and I tested the extraction route that afternoon. The orchard south of the estate descended toward a dry streambed. If prisoners reached the trees, 6 people could hold the narrow path against twice their number. Lyra wanted to know exactly how much time she would have. 7 minutes after the first alarm, I said. That assumes trained guards choose the nearest threat. Most people do. And when they do not, we adapt. She drew a practice blade from Grayfin's captured weapons. Show me. We trained behind the chapel where the ground was flat. She attacked directly, not because she lacked subtlety, but because she wanted to measure my body. Her first strike tested reach. The second tested my injured side. I turned inside the third, caught her wrist, and found her shoulder against my chest. Blue-silver light curved around us. It was faint, no wider than a shield, but I felt pressure push my practice knife away from her ribs. Lyra froze. Her breath touched my jaw. Copper-red hair had come loose against my hand. It protects whoever you are committed to protecting, I said. You were attacking me. You were protecting the route behind you. Her eyes shifted toward the villagers watching from the chapel doorway. I released her wrist. She did not step back immediately. Do not build a plan around something I cannot control, she said. Then we build the plan around you. The aura becomes an advantage, not a requirement. She lowered the wooden blade, and if I cancel the operation, we do not go. Even if you believe I am wrong? Yes. She studied me for a long moment. That may be the first reckless thing you have said. If I give you authority, it has to be real. Her expression softened by a fraction. Then remember that, when the plan becomes difficult. The operation began after sunset. The goal was to free the prisoners and deliver proof to Dorn before Vayne could summon soldiers. The obstacle was that the ledger and prisoners were in different parts of the estate. The plan had 3 essential steps. Mira would enter the east cellar and open the cells. Bram would take the private ledger to Dorn. Seraphine would disable the dogs and inner guards, while Lyra held the orchard route. I would keep Tal and Vayne from stopping them. No poison in the kitchen, Seraphine said. I was not going to suggest it. You looked at the chimney twice. Smoke would empty the room. Smoke would also reach servants who cannot leave their posts. My mixture goes in the kennel water and on 2 guard scarves. Exact targets. Seraphine looked pleased by the support and irritated by the reason. Bram held up the letter for Dorn. When I have the private ledger, I take the east horse and deliver both. If the alarm sounds early, I leave immediately with whatever proof we have. You wait for my signal, I said. He looked at me through the brass rims of his spectacles. If waiting risks the only evidence, I disliked the answer that followed. Use your judgment. Mira leaned across the table and removed my right glove. I watched her do it. You are getting slower, she said. You are getting predictable. She turned the glove over, examining the hidden seam where I kept a thin lockpick. Then she slid it back over my hand, finger by finger. The contact was deliberate, her amber eyes fixed on mine. I am testing whether you object more to theft or return, she said. I object when you test boundaries without asking. Her smile faded. Then I am asking now. Do I return what I take, or do you decide it was yours all along? You return it because you choose to, not because I own you. She held my gaze. No cages, Kael. Even if the clean plan fails. No cages. Lyra noticed the second folded map inside my coat. What is that? A fallback route. For whom? For whoever reaches the west wall. She held out her hand. I gave her the map. It included only 4 escape marks, 1 for each founder. No line for the prisoners. Lyra's face hardened. You said everyone. The primary plan is everyone. The fallback preserves the people most capable of returning later. Then your fallback is not my plan. She tore the map in half and placed it on the table. If the prisoners cannot leave, I do not leave. If you order otherwise inside my defense, I will ignore you. I looked at the torn paper. The old part of me wanted to restore the contingency, hide it better, and proceed. Understood, I said. It was a boundary I had agreed to respect, whether I liked the cost or not. The estate had 3 walls that mattered: the outer stone wall, the inner service court, and the decisions of people who believed no one beneath them could act together. We crossed the first, before moonrise. Seraphine touched the kennel basin. Green-violet threads spread through the water. The dogs drank, paced twice, and lay down without pain. 2 guards near the kitchen pulled scarves over their mouths against the cold. The powder Seraphine had placed in the cloth took less than a minute. One sat down heavily. The other tried to call for help and produced only a confused whisper. Bram entered with 3 servants returning from the grain shed. His rust-colored vest and ink-stained fingers belonged in a collection office more naturally than any weapon would have. Mira vanished into the drainage shadow. Not completely. Her outline thinned into violet-black liquid and slid beneath the east wall. The darkness snapped closed behind her. I counted 3 breaths, 4, 5. The pulse under my wrist sharpened. Then it eased. She was alive. Lyra took position in the orchard with 4 freed captives who had chosen to help. I entered the west corridor through an upper window and reached Tal's office without meeting resistance. I entered the west corridor and reached Tal's private office, where I expected to find him before he reached the alarm. The room was empty. An iron box beneath his desk stood open. He had either moved the ledger or left its absence as bait. I turned as the door closed behind me. Oren Tal stood there with a crossbow aimed at my chest. His shaved head shone in the lamplight. The braided goatee moved when he smiled. "The man from the road," he said. "One guard lived long enough to describe you." The precision of the trap told me someone had supplied more than a frightened guard's memory. "Where is Vayne?" I asked, waiting to see whether you die quietly. "You know the answer," Tal fired. I dropped beside the desk. The bolt struck the wall. I threw the iron box at his knees and crossed the room before he reloaded. He drew a short hooked blade. I caught his forearm, drove his face into the door, and felt cartilage break beneath my palm. He laughed through the blood. A bell began ringing in the east cellar. Not the alarm bell, a smaller, frantic sound. Mira's warning. Tal's smile widened. The prisoners leave tonight either way. Smoke entered beneath the door. He had prepared the fire before we arrived. The clean plan ended there. I struck Tal in the throat, took the hooked blade and opened the corridor door. Flames climbed the east stairwell. Servants ran toward the courtyard. 2 guards dragged oil jars from a storage room and threw them down the cellar steps. Vayne had chosen to destroy his witnesses. "Fire!" someone shouted. The estate alarm joined the cellar bell. Bram appeared at the far end of the corridor with a ledger under his coat. "I have it," he called. "Take it to Dorn, now." He looked toward the smoke. Fear tightened his face. "If my numbers are wrong, they are not. Go." He ran for the east gate before I could give another order. That was his decision, not mine. Below us, Mira had reached the prisoners. The cellar held 11 adults and 2 children behind 3 iron doors. She opened the first lock before smoke filled the passage. The second had warped from heat. A guard came down the steps, carrying an oil jar. Mira left the lock, crossed the darkness behind him, and drove her knife into the back of his thigh. He fell. The jar broke across the wall, fire racing along the floor. She could have returned to the drainage passage. Instead, she heard a child coughing behind the 3rd door. The girl had small pointed ears beneath dirty hair, and a crescent-shaped mark near one eye. Mira stopped. The pulse beneath my wrist burned. I reached the cellar stairs as a section of ceiling collapsed. Heat struck my face. Smoke erased the lower steps. Seraphine caught my arm. "The oil is mixed with sleepthorn residue," she said. "The smoke will slow them before it kills them." "Can you stop it?" "Not the fire. The poison," briefly. She tore open a pouch, mixed powder with water from her flask, and soaked 2 strips of cloth. One went over my mouth. The other covered hers. "I have enough antidote for 6 doses," she said. There are 13 prisoners. Then bring them close enough for me to choose who needs it. Lyra's voice rose from the orchard. Movement south. Reinforcements were entering through the lower gate. Our positions were divided. The original plan required me to capture Veyr. The people choking beneath the fire mattered more. I went down. The third step broke under my weight. I struck the wall, caught the rail, and dropped into knee-deep smoke. A guard appeared with a spear. I moved inside the point, cut his palm, and drove his head into the stone. I took the spear and shoved a burning beam away from the passage. The heated shaft scorched my left palm through the wrapping. Mira stood at the warped second door, both hands buried in the shadow around the lock. Violet-black darkness covered her arms to the elbows. "It will not open," she said. "The passage is open. Get out." Her amber eyes flashed toward the third cell. "There is a child behind that door." The words carried more fear than defiance. She pressed deeper. Her body blurred at the edges. For an instant, half of her vanished into the black line beneath the door. Then the shadow seized her. Mira screamed. I grabbed the back of her coat. The darkness pulled the other way with enough force to lift her feet. Cold cut through the heat around us. Blood ran from her nose. "Mira, look at me." Her eyes found mine. "Release the far side." "I cannot feel my hand." "Then release your shoulder. Turn toward my voice." She twisted. I pulled with both arms. The shadow released her in a violent snap. We fell backward. Her left arm hung numb, but the lock had come through with her, torn from the door as if the iron had become soft. The prisoners pushed out. "Third cell," Mira gasped. I used the guard's spear as a lever. The bars moved less than an inch. A blue-silver plane struck the door from the other side of the smoke. Lyra came down the stairs with 3 estate guards behind her. "I told you to hold the orchard," I said. I did. Now I am moving the defense. Her aura curved around the prisoners, forcing smoke upward and deflecting falling sparks. One guard stabbed through the edge. The spear point tore across Lyra's shoulder. She did not break position. I obeyed her command without being asked. "Everyone inside the blue light," I shouted. "Move when she moves." Seraphine appeared behind the prisoners, touching throats, counting breaths, giving antidote only to those whose pupils had begun to fail. She shoved one dose into my hand. The child first. I drove the spear into the third lock while Lyra expanded the aura. The metal bent. Mira, using only her right hand, slipped the stolen pick inside and turned. The door opened. The 2 children came out under a blanket. One looked at Mira's crescent mark and stopped crying. Above us, Tall shouted, "Seal the cellar." He stood at the top of the stairs with a torch in one hand and blood covering his mouth. Lord Veyr waited behind him in an ivory-green coat, signet ring bright on one finger. 6 guards filled the corridor. Veyr looked down at the prisoners as if they were spoiled goods. "Burn it," he said. Tall threw the torch. Lyra turned her aura toward the falling flame. The impact shattered the blue-silver surface into fragments of light. The torch spun aside. Her injured shoulder slipped partly out of joint, and her knees buckled. Seraphine caught her. I climbed through the broken aura. The first guard thrust. I redirected the spear into the stone and cut his throat with Tall's hooked blade. Blood sprayed hot across my hand. The second struck my ribs with a club. Something cracked. I lost breath, stepped into him anyway, and drove my forehead into his nose. Mira moved through the shadow under the stair rail. Only 2 paces. It was enough. She appeared behind the guards, pale and shaking, and cut the strap holding the oil jars stacked along the wall. The jars rolled between their feet. Men stumbled. Seraphine threw a glass vial. Green-violet vapor burst across the corridor. 2 guards dropped their weapons and clawed at eyes that no longer focused. "Temporary," she shouted. "Do not breathe it." Lyra pushed the prisoners upward behind me. Her aura returned in broken planes, each one appearing only where a blow threatened someone she had chosen to protect. Veyr did not. Men like him believed consequence required permission. I reached him, seized the front of his coat, and drove him against the wall. "Your ledger," I said. "Who receives the people?" His dark green eyes widened at the question, not the violence. "You do not know what you have touched. Then explain it." A beam cracked above us. Tal came from the smoke with a knife aimed at my spine. Mira shouted. I turned and caught his wrist. The blade cut across my left palm and bit to the bone. Lyra's aura struck his arm before he could drive it into my throat. I caught his chain belt with my good hand, dragged him into the burning stairwell, and drove him face first onto the oil-covered floor. Fire climbed his burgundy coat. He screamed and rolled, reaching for me. The floor collapsed beneath him. Tal fell into the cellar he had tried to burn, taking flame and broken timber with him. His scream ended under the impact. I turned back to Veyr. He had drawn a jeweled dagger. His hand shook. "You cannot arrest me," he said. "I am not going to." Hooves thundered in the courtyard. Valedorn entered beneath the estate arch with 6 official riders, and Bram beside her, white-faced but upright. He held the private ledger against his chest. Dorn looked from the smoke to the freed prisoners, then to Veyr. Bram opened the ledger to one marked page. "Lord Cassian Veyr," Dorn said, loud enough for servants and guards to hear. "You are under arrest for fraudulent seizure, unlawful imprisonment, trafficking under false debt, obstruction of circuit authority, and attempted destruction of witnesses." Veyr's guards looked at the official seal, then at the prisoners, then at the burning cellar. One lowered his sword. The others followed. Veyr finally understood that power was not the dagger in his hand. It was the number of people still willing to obey when everyone could see the truth. That number had become 0. He dropped the weapon. I remained standing until Dorn's men took him. Then the pain in my ribs, the blood running from my hand, and the smoke in my lungs caught up with me. The courtyard tilted. Lyra caught me before I struck the stones. "The prisoners?" I asked. "Alive," she said. I let her take my weight. We returned to Grayfen at dawn with 13 freed prisoners, 4 carts of grain and tools, and 2 sealed chests of coin, medicine from Veyr's stores, 21 usable weapons, and 1 private ledger that Bram refused to let out of his sight. We also returned with my bruised ribs and burned cut hand, Lyra's dislocated shoulder, smoke damage in 6 prisoners, Seraphine shaking from exhaustion, and Mira unable to feel most of her left fingers. Victory had weight. We carried it into the chapel, one body at a time. Seraphine worked until noon. She treated the worst smoke injuries first, reset Lyra's shoulder, warmed Mira's hand, and only then cleaned the cut across my palm. By the time she finished wrapping it, her own hands were trembling from smoke and exhaustion. "You should rest," I said. "After the last patient," she replied, and moved to the next bed. By then, 11 of the 16 civilians freed from the road had chosen safe routes out. Tessa and Bram gave each group food, a destination, and the name of someone expecting them. 5 remained in Grayfen. Dorn offered the 13 estate prisoners legal transport and protection. 7 accepted, 4 to family, 3 to anonymous placements in a town beyond Veyr's reach. 6 chose to remain, temporarily, because the chapel had become a clinic, and the storehouse could support them. Grayfen now sheltered 11 freed civilians, in addition to its original residents. Tessa made the decision visible. She hung the inventory board in the hall. 9 days of old food had become 26 days with strict portions. The captured tools could repair the mill. The coin could purchase seed and medicine, but only after Dorn's court released it. The weapons gave Grayfen a watch, not an army. The gains mattered because we used them. They did not make Grayfen safe by themselves. By evening, shutters covered the chapel treatment room. Lyra marked watch positions along the ridge and an alarm trench beside the eastern road. Bram issued every weapon against a written name and made me sign for the knife I carried. "Audit access," he said. You are applying it quickly. Rules should apply before the founder needs an exception. Tessa handed him the storehouse keys long enough to count the sacks, then took them back. Mira sat on the chapel steps, flexing her recovering fingers. The little shadow-blooded girl had left with Dorn under protection, but before leaving, she had touched the crescent mark beside Mira's eye. Mira had not spoken about it. You abandoned the surveillance position, I said. There was a child in a cage. I know. Are you going to tell me it endangered the plan? It did. Her mouth tightened. It also changed the plan in time to save 13 people, I continued. Your judgment was correct. Your method nearly killed you. Those are separate facts. She looked at her numb hand. What happens when I cannot do it anymore? You remain the person who saw the cellar before I did. She studied me, deciding whether to believe it. Then she leaned her shoulder against mine for one brief moment and stood. Lyra found me in the hall after sunset. Dorn had offered to reopen the case that stripped Lyra of her title. She could leave with legal protection, witnesses, and a chance to return to the life she lost. Are you going? I asked. No. Why are you still here? The immediate danger is over. She looked through the open door at villagers training with spears under her instructions. Because the danger is not over for them. Because you accepted my refusal when you could have left us. Because this place needs a commander more than the court needs another noble name. She faced me. My condition remains. I command defense. I can stop a plan that abandons civilians. Agreed. And you do not hide another escape map from me. I felt the torn paper in memory. Agreed. Seraphine's answer came in the clinic. Dorn had offered her a sealed identity and passage to the coast. I could disappear, she said, while rinsing smoke from her eyes. Open a quiet practice. Heal people who pay, and avoid everyone who asks where I learned the work. You would be safer. I would also spend every day knowing the church continued. You know what they did, and you still respected my limits. That matters more than gratitude. Her pale green eyes held mine. I remain as the clinic is mine to govern. My veto is final. It is. Bram had a route to a trade town and enough coin from his legal share to start again. He opened a fresh ledger instead. If my numbers fail, he asked, do I still have a place here? If you hide the failure, we have a problem. If you tell us, we adapt. And if I am useless during violence, you brought Dorn before the estate became a grave. He looked down at the page. I left while you entered the fire. That was your role. Then I will require authority equal to the responsibility. All stores, routes, pay, losses, and reserves, including yours. Agreed, he dipped the pen. I still do not believe your arrival was an accident. It was not. That does not make me divine. Bram wrote that down without promising to agree. Mira made her decision last. She placed my glove on the table between us. I can leave whenever I choose? Yes. Without a tracker? Yes. Without someone following to protect me from my own decisions? Yes. Then I am staying until I dislike it. Clear enough. She pushed the glove toward me. I will handle scouting, messages, locks, and people who lie badly. No cages. No secret marks. If my shadow fails, I still choose whether I go. Agreed. And I keep access to every route I am expected to secure. With the local manager's knowledge. She considered it. Agreed. The 5 of us met at the long table that night. Tessa joined us because a hidden organization built inside a village without a civilian voice would become another form of occupation. We wrote authority because loyalty without limits would become another form of ownership. Lyra controlled defense and military command. Seraphine controlled medicine, poison, and biological ethics. Mira controlled scouting, messages, and covert information. Bram controlled money, stores, routes, and audit. Tessa represented civilian resources and risk. I coordinated strategy across them. I did not own their domains. No, I replied. It needs food, walls, and information. Names make promises visible, Bram said. Mira looked at the dark cloth covering the chapel doorway. We hide people behind one thing so they can act somewhere else. Seraphine touched the edge of the cloth. A veil. Lyra considered it. Not a throne, not an army. The veil, Bram said, and wrote it at the top of the first ledger. The name remained. The name mattered only if the work beneath it remained real. Dorn returned the next morning with a temporary protection order bearing her seal. She read it aloud in the communal hall, so no one had to trust a private promise. Grafen would remain under circuit protection, while Vane's accounts were examined. Tal's debt claims were suspended. No soldier, collector, or creditor could remove a resident without appearing before Dorn. This paper will not stop a sword, she said. It will make the person holding the sword choose whether he wants to be seen breaking the crown's law. That is often enough. Lyra placed 2 armed villagers beside the order when it was nailed to the gate. Law and force worked better when introduced to each other. The chapel side room became a clinic by noon. We carried out cracked benches, scrubbed soot from the walls, and built shelves from Vane's packing crates. Seraphine arranged bottles in rows based on use rather than value. Clean cloth received the highest shelf. Pain medicine and fever herbs went beside the bed. Poisons remained inside a locked chest, for which she kept the only key. A boy arrived with a hand split open from repairing the mill wheel. His mother stopped at the doorway when she saw Seraphine's green-violet threads. "Church work?" she asked. Seraphine did not hide the white streak at her temple or the serpent cuff that marked the education she had fled. "My work," she said. "You may stay and watch every step." The mother did. Seraphine cleaned the wound, removed 2 splinters, closed the deepest cut, and showed her how to change the bandage. She asked for no oath and added no debt to Bram's ledger. By evening, 3 more residents had entered the clinic. The protected trade stop began with 1 wagon, not a declaration. A merchant approaching from the south saw the order on the gate, the armed watch, and the repaired well cover. He asked whether he could sleep inside the village instead of risking the forest road. Tessa charged him a fair price for stable space and porridge. Bram recorded the payment in front of him, then divided it between feed, the communal store, and the clinic. The merchant watched the coin move into 3 marked boxes. "No private toll?" he asked. "No hidden charge," Bram said. The man agreed to carry 2 sealed letters to the next town. Mira inspected his wagon, his hands, and the mud on his wheels before accepting him as the first link in what she insisted was not yet a messenger network. "It is 1 wagon," she told Bram. "Then we test whether it returns," he replied. She took his pen and marked the delivery time. The first night after the name was chosen, Grafen had 6 watchers, 21 weapons, 1 guarded storehouse, 1 functioning treatment room, and a merchant sleeping behind walls he believed would still exist at sunrise. It also had shortages. The mill needed iron fittings. The clinic had enough clean cloth for perhaps a week. Dorn's order would attract questions from Vane's creditors. 5 freed captives were leaving, which meant fewer mouths, but also fewer hands. Progress gave us more to protect and made the next shortages easier to see. Tessa stood beside the inventory board and watched 2 families debate Dorn's relocation offer. "They are staying," she said. "How do you know?" "They are arguing about which roof to repair. People leaving argue about what they can carry." It opened a small room above the hall. There was a bed frame, a narrow table, and 1 window facing the eastern road. "This is not ownership," she said. "It is where we find you when a decision has consequences." I took the key. For most of my life, a permanent room had been a vulnerability. In Grafen, it became a responsibility. Later, when the hall had quieted, Seraphine found me outside the chapel. The village below the ridge showed small changes: a guarded storehouse, repaired shutters, a lit treatment room, 2 residents carrying messages toward the trade road. Not an empire. Not yet even a secure village. A beginning. Seraphine stood close enough that her shoulder touched my arm. "You told them a goddess chose you," she said. "You did not tell them the person. Who killed you was the person you trusted most. I told you. Part of it." I looked at the dark fields. Her name was Elena. We worked together for years. She knew every exit I preferred, every injury I concealed, and exactly how close she needed to stand before I stopped measuring the distance. Seraphine was silent. She chose power, I said. Then she fired the shot herself. And you expect one of us to do the same? I prepare for it. That was not my question. I met her eyes. Yes. She lifted one bandaged hand and touched the scar through my eyebrow. The gesture was slow enough to refuse accident. I am not promising never to hurt you, she said. I am promising that I will not pretend obedience is trust. So is respecting my veto. I already agreed. Then this is not payment. She kissed me. No performance, no gratitude. Her mouth was warm, deliberate, and brief enough that I could not mistake it for surrender. My hand settled at her waist only after she leaned closer. For one breath, I stopped measuring exits. She searched my face, then stepped back. Neither of us apologized or tried to define what had happened. She left me on the ridge with the taste of herbs and smoke still on my mouth. 10 minutes later, Bram called me back to the hall because the private ledger contained a mark he could not classify. We opened it beneath the hall lamps. The last pages listed payments from Veyr to a religious account with no local temple name. Beside each transfer was a pale ink symbol, 4 hooked lines around a narrow vertical eye. The same pattern engraved on Elena's weapon. The dark violet line beneath my wrist pulsed when I touched it. Seraphine leaned over the page, all softness gone from her expression. I have seen part of this before, she said, in restricted church laboratories. Lyra looked toward the sleeping village. Then Veyr was not the end. No, I said. The local enemy had falsified debts, stolen land, and sold people. We had stopped him. Graythan had food, a clinic, a watch, a legal shield, and founders who could leave, but chose not to. That victory was real. So was the larger truth. The symbol that marked my death was not a private wound from another world. It belonged to the first true enemy of the Veil.